All right, this video is a little bit of an addendum. One thing I do, some of these videos you'll see I've made in years past. For example, the last video showed us working on Blackboard, and I don't use Blackboard anymore. So I occasionally I want to make, I go back and I watch the videos and I try to make them better and see if there's things I'm missing. Of course, I'm always going to miss some things or you'll have questions. So that's why it's important that you ask questions in class when something isn't clear. It's a lot to tackle if you've never written any code before. It can be a little overwhelming, so just ask those questions, even if you have to send them, and you can direct message me in Google Chat if you're shy about that. But let's see, what else was I going to say? Couple of things. I went over very quickly. I talked a little bit about color in the last video, but I didn't really talk about how color works. So that's another reason you need to be reading along in the book, because they do a good job of talking about color in processing. So I'm going to start here. I'm just going to continue my little code here, and I'm going to set a stage size. And let me run that, make sure it doesn't get any weird errors. And here we go. So here's my totally empty sketch. So in the last video, I also talked about the reference, and the reference is super important. So the processing reference is something you need to have bookmarked. So to get to the processing, I'm going to sneeze again. To get to the processing reference, just go to processing and go to reference. And this will have all kinds of things, all right? So a lot of things that you will, I'm sorry. Excuse me. A lot of things that you will never ever use, but some things, like I want to know how to draw a circle. Well, here it is. All right. So the first thing I want to do, though, I hate that. I really hate that background gray. So I want to change my background, and I'm going to change it. Let's see. I'm going to change it to white. Now, color. Let me go back and see if I can find color real quick. Is it going to give me a straight on color? Let me see, RGB. Color mode, here we go, color. All right, so color, I'm not going to worry about color mode right now, but if we look down here at color, right? So we have a number of options, and the computer counts from 0. So the amount of any given color in any color channel, hang with me here for a second, is 255, all right? So if I wanted something to be absolutely black, all right, so the first option here is to set a color by just saying one value, giving it one value. So if I wanted to set a shade of gray, for, which is from 0 to 255, if I wanted it black, I would set that to 0. If I wanted it to be white, I would set that to 255. And if I wanted it to be somewhere in the middle, I could set it at 150. So what I want to do, I'm going to go back here again. I'm going to look up this background. Where did the background go? There it is. All right. So what I want to do is I want to set a background that's white. So I'm going to come in here. I've got my size set, and I'm going to set a background. And I'm going to set it to 255. So if I run my sketch now, and the hotkey for that is Command R, and my window loaded in the wrong monitor, but here it is. All right, so now I've got a white background. So now let's say, okay, I don't like it, I want it to be black. So again, if I change this to 0, Command R, and here it is. And if I wanted it to be that ugly gray again, which I hate, I could set it somewhere in the middle of 0, which is black, and 255, which is white. And there's my ugly gray. I almost always set my background to white. I don't know why. I just do. All right, so here's my background. I've got 255. And again, background is a function written by processing. No worries, we'll talk more about functions later. But this allows me to put in a color for the background. Now let's say Okay, I want this to be, okay, I want this to be red. So the way the colors, if there's three, it goes red value first, green, and then blue. So let's say I wanted it to be red. I could leave that at 255 with 0 green and 0 blue. And here we have a very intense red. Let's say I wanted to kind of calm that down. I could do something like add a little green in it. So it's like mixing paint. All right, except for our paint is what happens in these numbers. And let's see, I'll just add a little blue in there. That didn't do much, but it calmed it down a little. All right, so what you need to remember about colors is, again, you can change the color mode, and some students like to work in other HSV, which I tend to work in RGB. I'll talk more about that later, but the values for RGB go in order. So the first value is red, the second value is green, the third value is blue. If we want a black, all right, and if I go back here now and I look, let me go to where I found color. There are some other options. And again, this is where the reference comes in very handy. Let's say I wanted the color to be a transparent gray. So here I could put in my color of 155, and then the second value is the alpha, or the opacity. And if I wanted to do that with a color like an RGB, then I could do that with a fourth value. So if this is seeming overwhelming for you, read through the book and try these out. I mean, just try messing with them. That's what happens if I say, okay, I'm gonna put let me put less red in there. There's some green, there's some blue. And now I've got an opacity of 50. Let's see what that does. All right, so you can see I'm starting to get some values that are different. So, so another thing I want to do, and I think I talked a little bit about this in the other, let me just go to the reference. Let me go back to the main reference here, come on. Under 2D primitives. Primitives are, you'll hear this term a lot, and if you take a 3D class, which you should totally do, there's something called 3D primitives. And what that simply means simple shapes, right? A circle is a simple shape. You can build things with it, but it's the most basic thing. The circle is just called a primitive. So don't worry too much about that term right now, but here we've got a list of the primitives we could use to draw shapes. So let's say I'm gonna go, I'm gonna look up ellipse. So this is going to tell me, okay, if you want to draw an ellipse, you have to give it 4 numbers, all right? So the first number is a float, and I talked about those in the last video. And so the float is the first, where in the width of your stage is the ellipse going to start? And now you can change ellipse modes. I could look that up if I wanted to. If I could change it from the center or the corner. But right now I'm just going to leave it where it is. And so let's say the first value is the X, second value is the Y, or where it is down the screen, and then the third value is the width, and the fourth value is the height. All right, so let's go back, and you know what I'd like to do, especially when you're learning, give yourself notes, okay? So I want to draw an ellipse. So I'm going to give myself a note here in my comments, and I'm going to say the ellipse needs an X and a Y and a width and a height. So now I'm going to draw an ellipse. I'm going to spell it right. And I'm going to say, I'm going to put it at an X of 100. I'm just kind of guessing here, and a Y of 10. And the width is going to be 200. And 100. And let me draw it. Now you can see I don't like where that is, because what it's doing is it's my X of 10, right, is all the way here, and so half of my ellipse is not appearing. So I'm just going to move this down and run it again, and eventually get it somewhere that I want it to be. So let's see, I don't like where it is here, so maybe I'll turn the Y over. There are other ways to check for where things are, and we'll get into those later. All right, so here we go. And then I'm going to add a fill. And here's where I'm going to say, let's make this 200 of red and 100 of green and 100 of blue and 50 for the opacity. Whoops, that is a bad thing I just did there. Okay. And I get my semicolon. So if I run this now, you will now see that I actually have some transparency. I'm actually seeing through this color. And maybe if I turn up the green, turn that down, I'll see that a little better. So we're getting some opacity in here. All right, let's see. Let's see, what else will I do? You know what? Let's do this. Let's just, I'm gonna draw another ellipse. Let's see, I'm gonna change my colors to 200, 20, 50. Whoops, that's not what I want because I want them to overlap. Let's see, 200. Oh, yeah, I did a silly thing. Okay, hang on. Let me make that one. I'll make these two the same size. Move this one up a little bit. Not that far up. There we go. So here I can see, because I've got this fill at 50, now I'm getting some overlap and I'm getting some transparency, and that's kind of fun. That can, I can see a sort of a nice design there. So play around with it. The best thing you could do, look up shapes, try to draw them, challenge yourself with the triangle, and play. All right. Longer video than I meant. Sorry about that. All right.